Good evening, everybody. I'm so glad you are all here tonight to celebrate with me 95 years of living. When I was a little girl, about 10 or 12 years old, my grandmother, Wilcox, came to visit us on our farm in Oklahoma. When she came, she sat down in the rocking chair with a pan of apples to peel. She was going to make some German apple fritters for us. I sat down on the floor beside her, and she told me stories about her life. She was born in 1861. I was fascinated by those stories, but unfortunately, I don't remember one of those stories, but what I do remember is sitting there and thinking, I wonder if I'll ever have any adventures as my life goes along. Well, tonight we'll find out whether that question was answered or not. I was born, as you can see, September 30th, 1923, in Foss, Oklahoma. And Foss is in the western part of Oklahoma. It is extinct today. It's no longer there. When I was 6 weeks old, which would be in the middle of November, my parents moved from Oklahoma to Anaheim. And there's the car. They're getting the Model T all packed to go. And I think I can sort of see my father on the right-hand side packing there. But look at all the things they had to take with them. And a few days later, there we are in New Mexico. My mother's holding me. A few more days later, we're out in the desert of Arizona. And finally, we get to Anaheim, and this is the way Anaheim looked in 1923. What an upcoming and busy town that was, and that was it. And they do grow oranges in California. There were orange groves everywhere. Anaheim was a very prosperous and growing town, and there my folks are enjoying this orange grove. And when I was a toddler, this is about a year later, everything looks good and like a successful young couple. And when they like to tell the one story about me when I was a toddler, and it was my first Easter. They gave me a chocolate rabbit. They didn't tell me anything about it. They just let me play with the chocolate rabbit, and all of a sudden I see this black stuff on my hands, and I licked it. And I made the association of the black chocolate on my hands and what I had in my hand. And I guess I grabbed that rabbit and chomped on it and consumed it in a hurry. My folks moved across the border at Orange Thorpe. They bought a home over in the area of the northwest corner area of Harbor and Euclid, and had this nice little home over there. They raised chickens and sold eggs. And an aunt of mine from Oklahoma came out to visit, and there I am, 2 or 3 years old. My parents had 2 more girls. And the youngest little girl was a very fragile baby. She had asthma. She also was allergic to the scent of the orange blossoms. And at that time, when the whole valley and area is filled, this scent was very heavy. And the doctor said, you're going to lose her unless you move away. So they decided to go back to Oklahoma. And they went to the town of Hydro. Hydro is a very prosperous farm town today. And my parents rented a farm. And this is the big farmhouse. And it was in this house that my grandmother came, and I sat down on the floor and listened to her tales of her life from during the Civil War time and later. Isn't this a classic picture of a farm family? I love this picture. My mother would have loved living here at Walnut Village. She had the talents of Judy Marsh, Judy Phillips, and Irene Patrick. My dad, this would have been a prison to him because he was a farmer's farmer and a very much an outdoorsman, so he couldn't have tolerated such a place. My folks were in some ways rather unique. They were very much against drinking and dancing, and if anybody danced, their morals were questioned as whether that was the thing they should be doing. But they were very active in the community wherever they went. That didn't stop them from participating in the community. Oh, that's my brother Welby, and he's gone now. My sister standing closest to me, I'm the oldest of four. And then the next year after this picture was taken, a baby brother was added. So there were 5 children in the family. The smaller sister is still living, but unfortunately is in the last stages of Alzheimer's, since she's in her 90s. This is a painting of the school that I attended, a little white school instead of a red school. This is in Oklahoma, all of this. And this is the school, and you can see me here on the left-hand corner. And when I started in first grade, this was in 1929 when the folks moved back. And I started first grade and went to this school until I graduated in 8th grade when there's a change in our life. When I was in school, in particular the later grades, the only thing I wanted to read was the geography book and National Geographic. I didn't care anything about books, they were boring. I was interested in seeing the world and seeing other people and cultures. And I knew by the time I graduated from 8th grade what I was going to do. I was going to be number 1, a teacher, and then I had the summers off so I could travel and see the world. And that's the way it worked out. My dad grew wheat and cotton in there. Now, I didn't, the combine, and why I'm up there with my brothers and sisters, I don't know. But our life was about to be changed, and that's my dad standing up there beside it. I don't think they would have allowed us to ride in that bin while it was going around, but anyway, our life was about to change. Once you take a look at the car and the trailer, my parents had bought into some land that they could afford, which was in eastern Oregon. A reclamation project was being developed there, and they could buy the land undeveloped for just a few dollars an acre. So they bought 120 acres of land in eastern Oregon. So our family, 4 kids in the back, ages 7 to 13, my mother and father up front, and my mother holding a 1.5-year-old baby, and traveled all the way from Oklahoma to eastern Oregon. And all of our belongings were put in the trailer, except for a tractor, and that my dad had that shipped out by train to Oregon. He also built a cage to put on the side of the trailer to carry the family dog, Raspberry. And Raspberry rode all the way from Oklahoma to Oregon in this cage that he built for him. So here we are. We've gone to Vale, Oregon, which is about 75 miles from Boise. It's across from the Snake River. And we were related to Boise because the Cascade Mountains divides Oregon in half. The bigger cities are over to the west, as you can see, Portland and Salem. Salem is the capital of Oregon. And that's the what we came to. And look at the sagebrush. That sagebrush, some of it standing, it grew up to about 6 feet or maybe higher in some spots. and it wasn't far from the Oregon Trail. See my sister on the right, she's holding Raspberry. Raspberry made it in the cage very well. And my mother is over here and holding my brother Ralph. And so before they cleared any sagebrush away, they took this picture. There was no house on it. The sagebrush had to be cleared, the land leveled, and we built our own cabin kind of house. And there it is. And that's the well built outside there. And all of the land had to be cleared and leveled, gullies filled. There was so much that had to be done, and I don't know how they did it. So, because we moved there in July, and the winters get very cold up in that part of Oregon. But somehow they built that shack for us to live in. There's my brothers and sisters, and we walked down a little country road to a two-lane highway to catch the school bus. And when we walked on dark, cold winter mornings, to hear the coyotes howling out in the surrounding hills. This is alfalfa. Alfalfa can grow in undesirable circumstances, and it was the first thing my dad grew. And why that is stacked so high and how, I don't know, but that's the way they did it. And this would have been about 1937, well, not 37 because I moved there, 1938. I'm standing off to the left here in the white dress. My brothers and sisters and I never had to work in the fields, but I, being the oldest, was an assistant to my mother. So whenever it's harvest time, the wife would always have to cook a big, heavy meal at lunchtime for all the people that participated in the harvest. So I was the assistant to my mother. My dad tried growing sugar beets and potatoes, and they were successful, but it was onions that was most profitable. You can see how that land had to be flattened for irrigation purposes. And one day, I came home from school, I don't know why I did this, but I went out to the onion field to pick onions. I don't know whether I was going to be paid for it, I guess, so I guess I decided I might be able to pick some onions. And when I got back to the house, of course, I'm smelling like an onion. And so after dinner, I decided I've got to take a bath. So I went outside to get some water and something to heat the water on the wood stove that was filled with sagebrush. And then I brought in the big galvanized round tub, put it in the center of the little kitchen, and took a bath. And I thought, now to make sure I get rid of that onion smell, I'll put some Clorox in. So I poured in some Clorox in, and I thought, that might not be enough. I'll pour in a little more. So the next morning, I got on the school bus, and as I walked down the aisle of the school bus, the kids go, I smell Clorox. Got to school and walking down the halls of the school, and I smell Clorox. Talk about being humiliated. That couldn't have been the worst, and there wasn't a thing I could do. I couldn't get on the bus and go home, so I was smelling up the school all day long with the smell of Clorox. After 4 years, it came time, I graduated from high school, of course. It was time to go to college, and I had to make a decision where to go. And I chose La Grande, which is up in the northeastern part of Oregon, in the mountains that are there. I went to a teacher's college called Eastern Oregon College of Education. Today, it's Eastern Oregon University. It was a 3-year program they had to become a teacher to teach in Oregon. I had a very unique college time. It wasn't the ordinary kind of college of experience. This was in the fall of 1941. On December 7th, I went to church. When I came home, back to the dorm, and I heard, Pearl Harbor has been bombed. Well, I didn't know just exactly what it was all about, but I knew from the tone of the announcer that something bad was happening. And of course, as you all know what happened. Continued on until December, and then Christmas break. After Christmas, some of the boys didn't come back, and you know where they went. And then in the fall of 1942, went back to school, and there were practically no boys there at all. And for girls, gee, what a sad situation that is. But one day the announcement came that the girls would be moved out of the dorm into large homes in La Grande. La Grande was a prosperous lumbering town, and so there were some big homes available. So the girls were moved into some of these homes, and the Air Force took it over and brought in trainloads of boys just starting in the Air Force. It was a 6-week course. So every 6 weeks, one of the group would leave, and if a day or two later, the train would come in and bring in another group for another 6 weeks, and this went on for all the time. And of course, each time a group would leave, friendships had been made because we didn't have classes with these Air Force men, but on the weekends we could interact with them in a normal way. So all of the college activities had a military twist to them. So whenever the group would leave, if the girls could, they'd go down to the train and wave goodbye to the soldiers. And those scenes that you have seen where people are leaning out of the train windows and waving and kissing goodbye, that really did happen. And in a few days, there was another group of soldiers or Air Force people came in, and the cycle started all over again. And then after 3 years, I finally, would graduate. But, excuse me. Let's see what the third year was treated as a 4-year college. There was a special event called Evensong. I was honored to be chosen to be the Queen of Evensong for that particular year. One of the lady professors came up with this idea. The college was built on a hill, and there was a grand staircase that the buildings were built on. And so one evening during the week of graduation, this beautiful musical program went on the steps of the college. I had to memorize a speech that the professor had written that was, to me, very meaningless, an intellectual kind of thing that I couldn't even understand. But I did manage to carry it off. And so up in the middle of the stairway, you could possibly see me up there. And so I finally graduate. Then becomes this situation, where am I going to go teach? Now, I could either go to Salem and Portland. They paid $1,600 a year. But if I went over to Eagan, Oregon, on the Columbia River, I can make $1,900 a year. So 3 of the girls and I decided we would go to Eagan, Oregon, where that'd be $300 more than if we went to Salem or Portland. In addition to that, they had living quarters for the girls. 4 bedrooms were built in the basement of the school. The school building was a box-shaped building with the elementary grades on the first level. The high school was up on the second level. But down in the basement, there were 4 bedrooms where the teachers could live. Each would have their own room. And for our bathroom, we would use the high school boys' shower room. And as a living room and kitchen was the cafeteria. Now, this is all in the basement. There were no windows to speak of. Where the door was to the entrance to the basement, there was some light there, and of course there was a window in every bedroom. The town of Oregon consisted of 2 filling stations that carried some of the necessities of life. In between these filling station and little store combinations, there was a small building for the post office. Now, that was on the left-hand side of the highway that ran right along the side of the Columbia River. On the other side, between the highway and the river bank, there were a few little houses. This is all a farming community. 1 Pentecostal church and the school building. There was nothing to do. Here are 4 young girls. We were into this place making all of this money, but nothing to do. This is my contract, and you see the outline. I was paid $1,900 and divided, or $1,900, yeah. And divided by 12, that meant that my monthly payment was $158.33. Well, when we got the paycheck each month, we would go into Pendleton. On a Saturday, we catch the Greyhound bus that came along the highway, go into Pendleton to deposit our checks in the bank. They had a USO facility there, so this would be on Saturday night, so we go to the USO and dance and interact with the people at the USO. So by the time the year was over, the extra $300 we had made in Oregon, we had spent all of that, and so we didn't end up with any more than if we'd gone to Salem. At the end of the year, I went over to Eugene to attend the University of Oregon. I wanted to get my 4-year degree. When I went over there, and then I did get a job and started teaching in the fall of '95 in Salem. At the same time, my parents went over to the Willamette Valley. It's a beautiful, different environment over there. And they bought a home and lived in Albany. And although I never lived there full time, I would be there 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And this is the back door of the home on the farm that my folks bought over at Albany. So this then became home. Finally, in 1947, I had my degree in the summer of '47. I taught 1 more year at Salem, and then came 1948. I just was free. I could go out and see the world. And so I bought a ticket on the Lurleen, and I had my dad to take me from the farm to the train in Albany. I got on the train and went down to San Francisco, boarded the Lurleen, and there was the Lurleen under the bridge. I was off at last to see the world. And I thought, well, if I go to Hawaii, I would spend time there and see if I could get a job teaching in Hawaii. And you can see the famous Aloha clock tower. And when we got off the ship, there were Hawaiian people there who greeted us and draped us with the beautiful leis. I had reservations to stay at the Moana Hotel. There were two well-known hotels there, the Royal Hawaiian, which was really first class, and then this was the next one down, and this was the Moana Hotel where I stayed. And I had saved up enough money, I could stay there for about 2 weeks. And so I became a true tourist and tried to find a job. And well, I wasn't the only young girl out looking for a new place to go and something exciting. I spent some time there in Honolulu. Then I went to Maui for a short bit of time and to Molokai, where some family friends lived. And I stayed there probably a couple of weeks. And got a telegram from my mother that I had been offered a position at Klamath Falls because I had resigned from Salem. So I reluctantly came home and flew home on a Pan American plane. When I got on the plane and I saw what the stewardess was doing, I thought, that's the job I want. I want to become a stewardess and I can see the world. I could hardly wait to get back to San Francisco. And it was on a Friday. I had to wait the whole weekend, but by 9 o'clock on Monday morning, I was out at the airport at the personnel office and was wanting to apply for a position. And I said, I'll do anything to be hired. I'll sweep the hangar, whatever it takes, but I want to become an airline stewardess. And she said, well, we can't hire you right now. So there was nothing I could do but go back to Albany and spend some time in Albany at my parents' home. A few weeks later, I got a letter from Pan American, and they said, you have been hired to become a stewardess. So I went back to San Francisco, was in training for about 6 weeks, and finally I became a full-fledged Pan American stewardess. I was thrilled to death. Here was a little farm girl, and here she had the most wonderful job a girl could have at that particular time. At the beginning, in 1948, I flew on a DC-4, which was the old prop planes, as you can see, two propellers on each side. And then in the early 1949, Pan American started flying the Boeing Stratocruiser, which was a double-decker plane. And we're flying, well, I'm not on that plane, but you can see it flying over Alcatraz. People were really impressed with the Boeing Stratocruiser. It had a lot of innovations. Down in the lower part of the belly was this cocktail lounge. Look how spacious it is. Another innovation was that there were plenty of leg space, and this lady could make a bed for her children down there. And there was a berth that could be pulled down from the ceiling, and even adults could climb up there. I don't remember how they got up there, but there was a berth that could be dropped down from the ceiling, and people could sleep. Now, on the DC-4, it took from about 10 to 11 hours to fly from San Francisco over to Honolulu. But with this, the time was much shorter. And here's an article that was printed in the Pan American newspaper. This plane could carry 64 passengers. The DC-4 will carry a little over, 30 or 30-some people. And it took from 10 to 11 hours to fly across. Here, they were able to fly across in 8 hours and 23 minutes. What is it today to fly over to Honolulu? 5 hours. So we're making progress, and this was the inaugural flight. And when I became a Pan American stewardess, I'm back at the Moana Hotel. That's where the cruise stayed. This is the backside of the Moana Hotel. And Waikiki Beach. It was great fun. And on each flight, you got at least 1 day off after the flight before you went out again on another flight. And so it'd have 1 day off at least, where you could lounge around in the Banyan Court and on the Waikiki Beach. And there I am, lounging on the Waikiki Beach. And on my first trip here, group going out to the cruise being taken out to the airport, and I get out to the airport, I am thrilled to death. The plane is completely filled with Fijian sailors that looked like this Fijian man. They were flying to Los Angeles, and on that particular flight I was flying from Honolulu to Los Angeles. And so the plane was filled with these Fijian sailors, and they were coming over to pick up some kind of a sailing voyage, and they were going to sail back to Fiji. And when we dropped them off, then we were in Los Angeles, so the crew stayed at the famous Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. It was Christmas time, and I heard some noise outside the window on Sunday night, looked out the window, and this is what I saw. The famous Hollywood Christmas parade was going down the street.
What year was this?
And that would be 1949, or 48, I'm sorry, 48. And we had the day, 1 day off after we dropped off the Fijian sailors, and it was that night on Sunday night, which would be this coming Sunday night. My first flight was last night, or yesterday, the 29th, and it was on the, so we fly back to Honolulu, and here we are back on Waikiki Beach in the Moana Hotel in the distance in the Banyan Court. And there I am. This is a map of all the places we flew to. And one of the trips was to fly out of San Francisco, down to Honolulu, from Honolulu down to Suva. Suva is the capital of the island of Fiji. We didn't land at Suva, we landed at the opposite end of the island, where we'd be closer to Sydney and Auckland. And when we got off the plane there in Fiji, here was always a Fijian sailor to greet everybody in a traditional Fijian dress. And the stewardesses, this is the hut that they stayed in. All the crews stayed in grass huts, and this is the facility for the stewardess to stay in. When we flew down in that area, we would stay for 3 or 4 days waiting for the next plane to come through. So one day I was out walking around in the area, it's very rural, and all of a sudden I come to a Fijian school, and you can see buildings back there. All the classes were being held outside. This is an intermediate grade geography class, and I was fascinated by the map that's hanging off the tree. It was a map of the world. And here in the States, we see the map, either the world map, divided on the Pacific Ocean, or it would be Russia that will be divided usually. But to my surprise, On this map, the United States is divided in half. Then we flew out to the Orient. And when we flew out that way, we would always go Honolulu. A few days later, we would go to Wake Island. And at Wake Island, there was much evidence that there had been a war. This is 1948 and 49. So the war had been over only 3 years. Wake Island is what they call a coral atoll. And you can see there, grass and trees don't grow there. The surface is so white that it's just blinding. And you'd have to have colored glasses. And it was a strategic place during the war. And there was a while that the Japanese occupied that island. The stewardess, well, on the crew and everybody, lived or stayed in Quonset huts. What a contrast to the Moana Hotel or the Hollywood Roosevelt. So if we're going to Tokyo, we go San Francisco, Honolulu, stay a day or so, then to Wake Island, stay a day or so, and then up to Tokyo. And when we got to Tokyo, there was much evidence of military in the area. And this is a big performance. Secretary Vorhees was there, and this is around the Imperial grounds where this demonstration was going on. And one time I went there, we stayed at this truly authentic Japanese hotel that would have been built before the war. It was just beautiful. This is the lobby. Look at those murals up there on the wall. This is a bedroom. Now, I don't remember staying in a bedroom that looked like that, but that was probably really first class. But there were many Americans living there. And then this is outside, it was landscaped beautifully in the Japanese style. Somehow, I was invited to a Buddhist kindergarten class, and some special event was going on. So there I am with all these little kindergarten girls surrounding me. Aren't they dolls? And can you find me there in the midst of all the parents and people that came? I have no idea how I happened to be invited to that, but there I am, and I have other pictures to show I really was there. Now, if we went to Hong Kong or Shanghai, we went out as far as Wake Island, and then eventually we got up to Hong Kong and Shanghai. On October 1st, 1949, we were flying from Hong Kong to Shanghai. And we got about halfway to Shanghai when all of a sudden the seatbelt went on, and we began to go down. And there was no reason for it. There was no turbulence. There was nothing happening as far as we knew. But before long, we landed. And a crew member from the cockpit came out, and he said, "Sit still. The communists are taking over China." And we were stopped here. The pilot is out speaking to some of the authorities now, so stay here until they tell us what to do. We must have sat there for 15, 20, or 30 minutes. And I thought, I was looking for adventure, but I didn't have this sort of thing in my mind. And I thought, I've got to keep calm and follow along the directions. And finally, the fellow came back out of the cockpit, and he said, we have been turned around, and we're going back to Hong Kong. So that was the one short incident in connection with the communist takeover. Then in June of 1950, we were in Manila, stayed at the beautiful Manila Hotel there. And it was time for us to pick up the plane that came in from Hong Kong. And so on the day we were to take off, we were going down the runway, and just at liftoff, The plane did not lift off. We ended up in the adjacent field. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but we couldn't take off. On board were 3 little Chinese children. And guess who's in charge of the 3 children? Naturally, it fell to my responsibility, and we were taken back to the Manila Hotel along with all of the passengers. As I remember, we only had to stay one night. The children were going to San Francisco. Their parents had gone over the year before and had sent for them to come and now be a part of the family there. Being that they were from Hong Kong, they must have spoken some English. I don't remember having any problems with them at all. The next day we got on the plane, and from there we flew to Guam. And so there's Guam. Guam's a very different place out in the Pacific Ocean from Waikiki, which is a coral atoll. And this was the stewardess quarters at Guam. And again, it's Quonset hut, but look at the environment around it. Very tropical there. Then one morning, I called for a taxi, went out to the streets there on San Francisco, ready to go off on another tour. And the taxi was to take me out to the airport. And when I got to the airport, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was filled with Air Force or military men, and you see other planes behind. The government had contracted with domestic airlines that did not fly overseas to take soldiers over to Tokyo, and from there they would go into Korea and fight the Battle of Korea. When we got out there, Pan American was taking publicity pictures with all of this activity that was going on. So there I am with one of the soldiers. Can you find me in that sea of soldiers? Take a quick look. Does anyone recognize anybody? Did anybody happen to fly over to Tokyo in September of 1950? And take a look. If any of you did fly on a plane over to Tokyo during the Korean War, I thought those might be familiar-looking scenes. When I flew over, we got off at Honolulu. The plane went on. But eventually we made it to Tokyo. And on the return trip, the plane was filled with crying wives and crying babies. American families were living over there at the time. The husbands had gone off to fight the Korean War. The wives were being sent back to the United States. And at that point I thought, the glamour is wearing off. I don't want to carry any more plane loads of people with that kind of a situation. I was debating over whether to get married or not, and so finally I decided I would resign. So here I have come out of the Pan American office. I had to turn in my passport and the wings that decorated my cap and on my suit. And as a going away present, they gave me a big, beautiful 1951 calendar, a Pan American calendar. My husband was also from Oregon. We decided to go back to Oregon. And in June of 1951, we were married. We lived in Portland for about, that was 51. Then in 53, and I went back to teaching immediately. In 53 of November again, he's transferred down to Southern California. We could live anywhere in Southern California, but of course I came back to Anaheim because I had an aunt and uncle and some cousins living here. My aunt and uncle are living in a new house where there was once a thriving and profitable orange grove. It has now been although trees are being yanked out and houses are being built there. And we towed this Ford car down behind the Oldsmobile when we came down. This is the way Anaheim looked then in 1950. Things are really booming. People were coming from back east, and a good share of them were veterans that had been in California, brought their families with them. Everything was booming in Anaheim. There's another shot of how busy downtown Anaheim was. And of course, all of that has been ripped out, and Anaheim doesn't look anything like that anymore. We could have lived anywhere. I didn't want to live here in Anaheim. I wanted to be independent, although we were welcomed by the relatives, the aunt and the uncle and the cousins. One day we went up to Los Angeles to see if we could find some place to live up there, and there was nothing available. But in Anaheim, there was a new apartment house with one apartment left, and it cost $70 a month. Well, that was a little more than we thought we could afford, but there's nothing else we could do. So we rented this apartment. I went back to teaching immediately. We were moved in on December 1st of 1953. And on Sunday, I sat down on the sofa, opened up the Los Angeles Times, and I couldn't believe what I saw. I was just stunned. What I saw was my picture on the front page of the Los Angeles Times. It was a big article about the end of the Korean War. And so I saved the picture. Unfortunately, I thought, I can't keep everything. I'll throw the article away. And it was several pages about the Korean War. Today, I wish I had that copy and could read what happened during that time. But you can see the same pictures where the soldiers are out there, and the different planes, and then my picture. The apartment was over on Lemon Street, right close to La Palma, the intersection of Lemon and La Palma Street. No. Okay, the start drops off this beautiful baby girl here that we named Jill Ann. In September, I went back to teaching, and this is 1955. And so I taught for a couple of years. Then in the late 1950s, Anaheim School Board hired a new superintendent who came with a radical idea of introducing TV, closed-circuit TV, into the classrooms. The teachers, including myself, were appalled at such an idea. What an intrusion. How could you use a TV in a classroom? But on the other hand, I thought, oh, this would be sort of fun. There's a new adventure. I want to be a part of that. So I after the superintendent spoke to the teachers, I went up to them and said, I want to be a part of that program. I was hired to be the fourth grade social studies teacher. And as you can see what fourth grade social studies is all about, California. I taught for 2 years on TV and went back to the classroom. And you can see by the paintings on the bulletin what time of the year it is. It's Christmas. And at that school, the teachers in the primary grades would give the kids a box of crayons. They would be thrilled to death with it. And I don't know why it is, even just to see a box of crayons is like opening up a box of chocolate. There's something special about it. And of course, the tension would build up until the Christmas party, and it would be one wild day. And sometimes I would see a child walk into the room holding a special box, an identical box who you knew that was See's candy. Oh, it would just be on my mind all day long. I could hardly wait for school to be over. I'd go to shoo those kids out to go home at the right time. I would go over to my chair at my desk, sit down. I'd grab that box of chocolates, rip it open, and I would eat as many chocolates as I wanted until I got a headache. I that way with chocolates. Finally, I did get up and finish off the day and be ready for a Christmas vacation. Then I continued in the classroom until the fall of 1944 and 45. That picture is not necessarily that class. But I did continue on. And one day, in the 95, I taught until I was 71, and that was the year of 1994, 95. And so it was in the fall of 1994, two men walk into the room with a computer in their hands and started looking where they could put a computer. And I thought, oh dear, let me out of here. I felt just like the teachers did back 60 years ago when the TV was introduced. And since I had taught for 40 years in Anaheim at that time, at the end of that school year, 44, and I just retired in the December of 94. But at the end of that school year, I was invited back to the teachers' retirement party for all teachers that were retiring in that particular year. So there I am being honored for my 40 years of teaching in Anaheim. But in addition to that, I had taught 10 years. I started in 1944 back in Oregon. And so I taught in Oregon, and even when I was flying, I taught school. Because when we came back from those long trips, we'd be out for sometimes as much as three weeks, hopping from one island to the other to get out to as far, I went out as far as New Delhi, India. And when we come back, we have approximately the same amount of time off. So on those times that I had off, I would substitute teach in San Francisco. So I can say I really taught from 1944 to 1994. And so tomorrow, I will have been retired for 24 years. And when I retired, my husband was fine. And so for the first few years, we had a great time of a retirement life. And unfortunately, he came down with Parkinson's disease. And about 10 years after I had retired, he passed away and had not only Parkinson, but in stages of the Alzheimer's disease. The next year, and then that was in October of 2003. Then in 2004, I had myself reorganized. And in September of 2004, Walnut Manor made an announcement to the community that they were going to tear down Walnut Manor and build something new. Well, they had a typical Walnut Village kind of festivities to make this announcement. And I came because I had begun to think about moving into such a place. And I came, and what a great event they had. They moved in a portable stage, and they invited some of the, or at least some of the councilmen came, gave speeches. They had live music. They had food and drink. And of course, there was nothing to look at or to see what kind of place it was going to be. But they had a table about half the size of a ping pong table. On that was a wonderful mock-up model of the way Walnut Village was going to live. The other thing, they had drawings of the apartments. Those drawings were just about a step up from a drawing on a napkin, but you could get the idea of what an apartment would be like. Well, I was quite excited. I was ready to make that kind of a change in my life, and I was the first one to buy in to Walnut Village at that place. And they said it would be about 2 years before I could move in. I thought, well, that's fine. I'm not ready to move. I didn't have any health problems. Well, it turned out to be 5 years. But during that 5 years, I traveled all over the United States. I signed up or took trips with the Gadabout travel company over in Palm Springs, and they worked with a lot of the senior centers. The good thing about it was they would send some kind of transportation and pick me up at my front door, take me to one designated spot where everybody met, and then people were brought in from all over Southern California to this spot. When the tour was over, they bring me back home to my house. So it was a real easy way to travel. And so then, of course, it turned out to be 5 years, finally. And here we are. And I wanted to be able to see out. So my apartment is right straight up this sidewalk, and it's right there in the center. And I chose that because I wanted to be able to see out. So I can see out between the two ends of the buildings, and I can see the across Anaheim, and off in the distance on a clear day, I can see the hills, which I think are the Orange Hills. So then I asked myself, did I have any adventures when I was growing up? Well, my answer is, yes, I think I had my fair share of adventures, and I hope you have enjoyed hearing some of them. But there's more. There's more. Not much. But I want to introduce you. Maybe you can turn the lights on now. Or is that going to? We don't want to. Do you want to see them? You. We can. Well, they. Okay. All right. My family, stand up. This is the. Dorothy and Ralph, sit down for a minute because, or else get no, I know, stand again. All right, yeah. Dorothy, stand up there beside Ralph. Go on the other, okay.
Can you tell she's a school teacher?
This is the adorable baby that was born when the stork came to visit Disneyland. She is a retired kindergarten teacher, and she taught at the school right straight up Walnut Street here at Betsy Ross School. She also has an all-women's bluegrass band, and they have played here. And this coming Thursday night, the 6th, she and her band will be playing over at the PAC. And standing beside her, where you can sit down, is her husband, Mike Worley. But officially, he is Dr. T. Worley. He is a retired superintendent of the North Orange County ROP program. I can't tell you what it's all about, but it's a new version of the old vocational classes that they had in high school, shop and that sort of thing. After we finished with all this, you can come and speak to anybody up here. Ask questions, make comments, or whatever. Then over on the other side, Ralph, stand up. This is my baby brother that our mother carried in her arms all the way from Oklahoma to Oregon 81 years ago. Ralph was a makeup artist out at Disneyland for 30 years. And when you saw beautiful wigs, prosthetic noses and ears and so forth, Ralph probably made those. And when he when he left Disneyland, then he went to CBS, and he was a makeup artist for the what was it?
Young and Restless.
Young and Restless show. Worked there for quite a few years, and he over 2 years, 2 different years, he won an Emmy. So he is the owner of 2 Emmys. Okay, you can sit down, Ralph. And then you have seen, this is Dorothy. And Dorothy and I are cousins, but not really, not blood cousins. Our husbands were first cousins. And we were married in the same spring. She was married, they were married in May of 1951 up in Oregon. We were married in June of 1951. Quite by happenstance, both couples ended up down here in Southern California. Dorothy lives up in Pasadena. She lives with her daughter. Her daughter doesn't provide her with activities like we have here in Walnut Village. But we've always had much in common, and have done many things, and I've invited her here many times, and some people don't know whether she really lives here or whether she's a visitor. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, yes. I've got a surprise for you, and I'm anxious for you. I forgot one other thing I must tell you. When I was traveling, one night, there's a group of us sitting around, and one man said, "I have a Hershey bar every night." And I thought, oh no, I don't need to hear that. That preyed on my mind for years. That man has a Hershey bar every night. Finally, about 2 years ago, I thought, I'm going to give in. At 93, it's not going to make any difference whether I have a Hershey bar or not. So I had Jill to get me boxes. I buy them in the boxes now of Hershey bars. And I don't wait till night to have a Hershey bar. It's preying on my mind too much. Anywhere from 10 o'clock onward, I might have my Hershey bar. So my surprise to you now, with what you've heard, I have a treat for you. What do you think the treat is? So I'm going to have my relatives come with boxes of Hershey bars for you. And I chose the dark ones. You got to be healthy, and the dark chocolate Hershey bars. But I'm have for you. In addition to that, Jill is showing her talents again, and Jill has helped me put this presentation on, and she has made something special for the Hershey bar. And then last year, Jill had a 94th birthday party for me. And on the invitation, she said, no gifts, no cards, but you can bring a chocolate candy bar. Well, nobody brought one candy bar. Candy came in boxes, baskets, and one very creative lady brought something unique that I want you to see, and see if you have seen anything like this before. A bouquet of her candy bars. Have any of you ever seen a bouquet? Well, then after that, I was down at Vaughn's downtown, and in the florist park, florist section, they had bouquets of candy bars like this. But one of the members of the Jill's band is very creative, and she made that bouquet of candy bars. So that will be on the picture as all the relatives here have a box of Hershey bars for you. So don't leave yet until you get your candy bar to take home with you. And now then, with all of this confusion going on, I turn on the light again. This is Mike's son, Matt. Matt is a professional cameraman, and he works for a company that travels all over the world taking pictures. So he has taken a picture of this event tonight. So we're real proud of his talents. All right. Oh, yes, I've got mine. In fact, she brought it to me several weeks ago with this idea. I had the idea of passing out candy bars, but she came up with this idea of making the sleeve to put over it. Isn't that great? When I was here as a child, before we moved back to Oklahoma, my folks went up to Exposition Park up in Los Angeles, and they found this beautiful camera, and they advertised, or somehow they tried to find the owner of something so valuable, and they never found them. So they would never have had a camera, although the one from Oklahoma, there had to be another one. This is when I was living in California, so some of the pictures were taken with the camera that was found up in the Exposition Park in Los Angeles.
When you were a stewardess in the military pictures, where did you get those?
Well, that was from the Pan Am. Pan Am
Yeah.
had a photographer doing promo, so she just was lucky to be at the right place at the right time.
That was all it was. It wasn't that I was a glamorous stewardess. It was just a happenstance at the right time. And they gave those pictures to me. I never expected to get any of them. So.
And they look like they should be on the cover of the Life magazine. And I have tried to place them because we don't know who any of the soldiers are. So, if I find a Korean War, this or that, I try to give it to them. So if you know somebody, I should give it to you. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Yeah.